Alright, what's up y'all, it's LakerFan here. As I see by the title of today's video, we're here to talk about the 5 badges that need to be buffed in NBA 2K23. So we're gonna get straight into this. I hope y'all enjoy. If you do, feel to drop a like, sub if you're new to noties, all that good stuff. To start us off, I want to talk about the honorable mentions. So the first and foremost honorable mentions are gonna be clamps and unpluckable. Now I understand some people are maybe watching and listening on that, and you're thinking I'm crazy because you think clamps needs a severe buff. You might not think the bump animations are good enough, and you think unpluckable needs a severe buff as well, or at least a glove nerf. But I'm here to talk about in today's video how until one of those two things happens, I don't think the other should happen either. I think defense is way too good right now with how glove is and unpluckable currently is, and if you wanted to nerf that in a sense, I think you need to be able to put clamps in as a better buff. So if you're ever going to nerf glove or buff unpluckable, I believe you have to, absolutely have to buff clamps as well. But until any of that happens, I don't think you need to buff clamps currently, because I'm not gonna lie, if you buffed clamps currently and didn't do anything to glove or unpluckable, it'd be crazy, way too OD on defense. So I think for the sake of the game's balance, it would be good to get a slight buff to unpluckable or a slight nerf to glove, but until something like that happens, I believe that you can't touch clamps either. So I would love to have put clamps in this video, and not to mention, I think there's way more badges that need a lot of help in this game, and ones that are very unreasonable, that really have no reason to run even for the builds that should very much cater to it. And we're gonna get straight into that. Last thing that I want to talk about though is the other two honorable mentions. I'm talking about Challenger and Deadeye. I think honestly, contests are really good and shooting contested isn't really good, so I do believe Deadeye could use a little bit of a buff as well. And then for Challenger, I just think shot contests are really good just in general, but Challenger really doesn't do anything for me if I'm being completely honest. So I think what they need to do is maybe tone down shot contests in general and force you to run Challenger a little bit to be able to get more reasonable contests, because it seems currently that you can get ghost contests on anything. I think it's more perimeter defense based, which is okay too. I understand ratings should matter and it shouldn't be only badges, but me personally, I don't think Challenger is a very good badge at all, if we're being honest. And again, Deadeye could probably use a little bit of help. You don't really see many contested shots go in this year, not to mention that it changes your timing when you shoot contested on top of that. So it's very tough to hit contested in this game. I know you're probably listening to the video, you're like, oh, but I've seen a 40% contested jump shot going against me one time or 2 times, maybe even 3 times, but it's not happening to you consistently. I can 100% guarantee that. You are not consistently getting mitted by jump shots this year like you have in the past, which for, you know, all intents and purposes is actually a pretty okay thing too, if we're being completely honest. But again, I think giving some people a little bit more ability to hit contested if they have a high 3-pointer and a high level of Deadeye is a little bit reasonable. Nothing super crazy, but I do think it could use a little bit of a buff, and that's why it's an honorable mention. It's not actually in the list. So anyway, moving along into the actual list, we're gonna have Mismatch Expert at number 5. Now the reason I put this on the list, a lot of the small guards are already getting hit in this game. I mean, you're already like really struggling in some situations to play defense, and at the expense of making a small guard, I will say a lot of them really hold onto the ball really well. It allows you to get that Hall of Fame unpluckable, which in my opinion still is very good. And that's why I think the badge doesn't need a very big buff, because me personally, on a build that has 90 steel, silver glove, another one that has 95 steel, gold glove, I don't be getting plucks on dudes that have Hall of Fame unpluckable. I'll just leave it at that. If you want to talk about Hall of Fame glove getting patched a little bit in terms of like nerfing its power a slight bit, I do understand that. But as far as the ones that need the buff, I believe Mismatch Expert, you got to give these small guards a little bit of incentive to run this badge. Anything 6'6" and below, it's a tier 3. That's so unreasonable. Nobody's going to run a tier 3 Mismatch Expert on a 6'6" and below build, and anything above 6'6" at 6'7" and above, it's completely useless to run the badge. I mean, it'd be the most stupid thing, and not to mention the badge just isn't that good. It doesn't really stun people so crazy or make them slower, and for really all intents and purposes, how do you even make Mismatch Expert good? I guess you would like force people to play bad defense, make them more slidey, make them slower. I don't know if that's really realistic, but either way, this badge does not belong in the tier 3 for any small point guards at all. It's honestly crazy talk too, because when you look at it, having quick first step and unpluckable in tier 2 for small guards instead of Mismatch Expert is really crazy talk. These should be moved absolutely to this tier 3, and Mismatch Expert definitely tier 2 at the very least. But anyway, moving along to number 4, I'm going to have guard up on the list. I do believe, like I said, that jump shot contests are really good in this game. I can kind of just stand in front of people's face, not even put a hand up, and get a ghost contest. And to be fair, I think that's reasonable for me to do as far as getting contest on those types of shots if they aren't running guard up. But the problem is that even if they do, the badge just isn't that good at doing what it says it's supposed to. So as you can see, increases the ability to make jump shots when defenders fail to properly contest. Again, there's no such thing more as an example than an improper contest than for me to literally just get a ghost contest and kind of just stand right in his face and not put a hand up. And I do believe believe that's a very good method of playing defense this year. I'll have another video that I'm going to drop within the next week or so that's about defensive techniques and styles and stuff like that you can switch up, and it's going to be a good video, but we'll get to that at a different time. But again, that ghost contesting technique and just method and stuff like that, it's so good. And again, there's no counter to it, really. So I truly do believe if you give these people a little bit of an ability to hit contest through that non-hand up situation, I think that's really, really key. It's funny because a lot of y'all are probably seeing this and you're like, Laker, you really condoning for these contested shots to go in. As I said, there's a reason that Deadeye was just a honorable mention. It wasn't thing that actually got on the list. So it's nowhere near the top 5. It's probably around like 7, 8, or 9 or something like that on my list. But what I really do think belongs on here is guard up. I think it's very unreasonable for me to be able to get contest through not putting my hand up at all. And, you know, I'm not saying no contest at all. And again, if people don't run guard up, I think you should still get contest like that. But if they do run guard up, I think it should negate the contest by quite a bit. Like at least cut it in half or something like that. And that's not the case. This badge really is just bad for all intents and purposes. Anyway, moving along to number 3. We have Bully coming in on this list. Now, the reason I want to talk about Bully is because for any slasher type build out there, this is a constant tier 3. It's going to constantly be extremely expensive for you to run, and it's nowhere near the power of these 3 badges right here at all. We're talking Posterizer, Slithery, Limitless Takeoff for anything that's 6'8 and below. At the 6'9s, obviously, you do end up like having a couple of these become cheaper. Same with 6'10, 6'11, stuff like that. You end up with Limitless Takeoff down in the tier 1. But currently, how I see it, Bully really needs to be buffed, or at least become a lower tier badge. Like when I say the buffs as well, I do also just mean more reasonable to run, because it's quite like crazy talk, if we're being completely honest, that this badge has to be a tier 3. I have played over 1,000 games. I'm talking 1,000 park games, nearly 50 rec games, over 50 3v3 pro-am games as well, and then like 10 5v5 pro-am games as well. And all of those included, I have seen me and my teammates combine for a total of 1 Bully animation. We have gotten hit with Bully 1 time over the course of 1,200 games, and that's pretty crazy if we're being honest. And again, it's probably because nobody runs it, because it's not worth running. Why would you ever run Bully over something like any of these other tier 3s like Poster, Slithery, Limitless Takeoff? And again, I think it's a little hard to trigger on top of that too. It's going to be tough to really get those animations to pop off. For me personally, I don't think I'll ever run this badge, no matter even if they put it in tier 2 in general, because for me with the contact dunk meter, I'm kind of just forcing contact dunks in that aspect. If you're someone who maybe uses your X button or like layups, so to say, more so, and you end up in those animations, you get kicked out of the contact dunk a little bit more, or again, like I said, if you're intentionally going for the layups of the acrobats, the Euros, stuff like that, obviously things like Bully will pop off a little bit more. But like I said, it's very rare. I really don't think this badge is like good at all, if we're being completely honest. And when I redo this tier list pretty soon, it's probably gonna be like a C tier or a D tier. I just don't think Bully pops off enough. Like I said, it's been 1 time over the course of 1,200 games. That's unreal. All right, so next up, coming in number 2, we have Chase Down Artist. Now the reason I'm gonna be putting this on the list so high, I really, in a dream world, I just believe those quick dunks, like the front clutches and the quick drops, would just get patched. I think that's the ideal solution to this, but there's no way that they're going to actually do that in this year's game. The only way they'd ever make that change is in next year's game by making the requirement so much more for the actual rating, or just take the animation out entirely, because they're both pretty unrealistic. I know some people have their beef with that, but that's my opinion. Personally though, I don't think there's any way they could ever do that, because there's no way you can just up and take an animation out the game mid-year. They're just not going to do that. That would be screwing so many people's builds over, so many of the fact that they just put their ratings to that exact level. They won't do that. So I think the next best solution, to be honest with you, is just to buff Chase Down Artist. Now, I have seen in the stage when it comes to that comp gameplay stuff, or even on Pro-Am, people are really respecting that anchor being at a high level, because it's going to force people to miss dunks pretty often. Even in the stage, like I said, people are running like gold Hall of Fame anchor type builds on the backside stuff, and it really makes people miss the quick drops sometimes. Now, the problem is, if Chase Down was a little bit better and they could get better animations to do so, again, the people that have the weak dunk ratings may end up in a situation where they just miss dunks more often, which I think is a competitive kind of hot fix, so to say. I think it makes the game competitively viable a little bit more. I know a lot of people are really fed up with the dudes that are coming out with the ISO off the top. You have to respect their three-pointer really hard, and then because you have to respect their three-pointer and they can shoot the ball, they can get past you in a much more manageable way. And then when Chase Down Artist is bad and they have quick drops, front clutches, all that stuff, and you don't have very good anchor, which that's reasonable if you're not able to stop people if you don't have good anchor. But if you have good anchor and good chase down artists, I truly do believe you should be able to contend for a lot of chase down blocks, no matter what their dunk is. Because really, like, why should 99 block and Hall of Fame anchor and Hall of Fame chase down artists not be able to compete with 80 dunk and silver limitless takeoff? That's just kind of crazy talk. I think you should be able to make people miss a little bit more often and actually get your hand in there. Now, the problem with me saying that chase down artists should be buffed is that it hurts the people who do regular dunks a little bit more. But unfortunately, that's just the game we play, where quick drops and front clutches are just so much more competitively viable, and it's unfortunate. Now, I don't know, like I said, if that's the right solution to it. It's just a sort of temporary hotfix where, like I said, I think the ideal solution would just be to take those two animations out the game and start actually toning some of these things and putting reasonable rating caps on the ones that are competitively viable. But again, some people have their gripes with that. Some people really disagree with me on it. They're like, quick drops is a very unathletic, realistic animation. I don't know about the whole realistic part, but definitely agree it looks a little unathletic. Think twice though. This dude is literally sticking his arms straight out. It's not that you're doing a quick, you're not doing like a rim grazer where you're barely like putting your arms all the way up to like barely even reach the rim. I'm talking these dudes get the elevation and they're sticking their leg out and stuff like that too, like looking crazy. And you're just throwing your arms forward, straight out horizontal, like you're way above the rim. If you really think about it, it's just, again, you're sticking your arms out straight forward instead of actually putting them up. That's how I see it. Like I said, I really do think that the ideal way of fixing this would just be to take those animations out of the game or make them a much higher rating as far as like balancing the game properly. But as it currently stands, I think your only other option is to just buff chase down artist. And again, I think a lot of people would agree with this too. Chase down artist is just kind of bad this year in terms of its power and ability to actually just chase down dunks in general. Definitely would help the sake of interior defense, especially against ISO too, which I know a lot of people are obviously running. Nobody really runs pick and roll anymore these days at all. But anyway, the last badge that we have on this list, and at number 1, is going to be corner specialist. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen the 2K Labs video, and this is really pitiful. Even on Hall of Fame, corner specialist currently, as it stands, is literally just not boosting your shot at all. By their study and by a lot of the community's feedback as well. They don't believe corner specialist is really helping them shoot either. I haven't obviously got any experience with this myself. I don't really shoot in the corner on my shooting build, and then when I'm on my slasher build, I obviously don't shoot in the corner either. I really just don't play the corner in general. So I will say, like I said, I don't think this would be bad for the game competitively. I think if corner shooters can shoot more consistently, and that's what they want to invest their badge points in, and that's what they made their build for, was to have corner specialists at a high level. Same with if you want to just be a catch and shooter and just run corner, catch and shoot, and claymore. That should be a very reasonable playstyle for someone to do. And again, corner specialist currently is just not giving them any boost. So that's my quick little statement on that as far as corner specialist. I think it's pretty non-debatable, non-negotiable. I don't think you should really have any gripes with the corner specialist getting a buff or anything like that, and that's why it's at number 1. But again, to backtrack real quick into the honorable mentions, I did mention Unpluckable and Clamps as far as those two things tied at the hip should be touched together. If you buff Unpluckable, buff Clamps too. If you nerf Glove, buff Clamps too. It's literally as simple as that in my opinion. Those two things need to coexist. If Clamps ever gets a buff, then obviously you need to give the guard something as far as some leeway in terms of buffing their Unpluckable or nerfing Glove in a little bit. But other than that, we have Challenger and Deadeye, like I said, also listed in those honorable mentions. I think you could maybe make a case for Blinders. I think, honestly, what's really stupid about this game sometimes is when you get crabs where, and pause, but anyway, when you get crab animations to pop off, aka as a ball handler, you get the defender stuck behind you on a size up. I'm not gonna lie, it actually still screws with your timing. I don't know why. You're not contested. That should never count as a contest to have someone behind you like that, and it makes for a really good competitive sort of balancing, so to say, on 2K. Because when you can get crabs to work, I think that's how you really punish defenders for playing super high on you, spamming reach-ins, stuff like that. You can really make them pay. And again, when the crabs just aren't good in 2K, I think it really makes for rim run guards and just stuff like that to be kind of something that people have to do. You have to be able to like get some source of offense besides 3 hunting, and generally it's going to end up being a mid-range fade or something like that. I do understand, yes, crabs are still reasonable. They're still okay to use, but I really do think they need to be a little bit better. And Blinders is still an aspect of that that's kind of to be talked about. Obviously, this is as far as your peripherals, so like it's anything to the left, right, or behind you for that matter too. And I think it could use a little bit of help. And I know a lot of this video was kind of centered on helping some shooting badges. Like I said, the honorable mentions were things like Blinders, Deadeye. We also mentioned, obviously, in the video to still talk about guard up as well. But for the most part, I think a lot of this was talking about helping small guards a little bit, because while I do love dancing on their grave, as a lot of you guys have seen on the YouTube channel, I think they could use a little bit of help as far as viability of using one. As we all know, what everybody's using in the park these days is literally just constant 6'7" and up. And really, to be honest, it really isn't even a lot of tall bigs either. It's just constantly going to be like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", and that's generally what you see in the park. It's generally what you're going to see in the rec. I mean, I've been loading in so many times in the rec with the subs on the stream, and I see constant like 6'7", 6'8", 6'8", 6'9", through 1 through 4, and then you need at least one big. But you constantly see that, and not saying that it's unrealistic, because the NBA is getting bigger, and obviously it's kind of understandable if it's going to translate to the video game too. But I really do think, for the sake of build balancing, we need to see a little bit of reasonable running the 6'1", 6'3s in the park. Now, for the stage kids, I'm not gonna lie to you, the 6'1s and 6'3s are still going crazy. For the really skilled players, those types of small guards are still plenty usable, but I do still think things like Mismatch Expert could use a little bit of help, guard up, like I said, and then, as we mentioned, obviously as well, the bully, chase down, and corner specialist for all the slasher, role player, or just like defenders out there on the backside. So anyway, that's all for video. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, feel free to drop a like, sub if you're new to on noties, all that good stuff. Like always, try to one to 2,000 likes, and if you made it to the end of the video, put badge, or feel free to leave some feedback on this video. If you have a difference in opinion and you want to leave any comments that you think as far as badges that need a buff in 2K23 as well, feel free to leave it. I'm very curious. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'll be asking as well about badges that need to be nerfed. I'm not gonna lie though, I don't really see a lot as far as it currently stands. I don't see a lot of badges that need to be toned down. I mean, honestly, I think the game's in a pretty decent spot. I think we just need a couple of these useless badges toned up a little bit. Like I said, guard up, very useless as it currently stands. Mismatch Expert, it's so unreasonable for small guards to have this in a tier 3. They'll never run this ever, and honestly, it'd kind of be hurting them at the same time too, because if you switched it and put Mismatch Expert in tier 2 and then Unpluckable and Quick First Step or something like that in tier 3, it actually probably hurt them a little bit. But again, I think this is like the most underused badge in the whole game. Things like Bully, like I said too, tier 3 for every slasher build, every finisher type build, and it's unreasonable for this to be so like cost heavy, and it just isn't that good of a badge. So whether we buff it or whether you move it down a tier in terms of it being more runnable, more usable, I think either is okay. But anyway, like I said, that's all video. Feel free to leave your feedback. And then that, take it easy, man. Peace.